AITA for refusing to let my brother live with me after he lost his job and house. I, 32F, have a younger brother, Jake, 29M, who I've always been close to. We grew up together and remained tight even as adults. I own a 2-bedroom apartment in the city, which I've worked hard to afford. I live alone and have built a fairly quiet, structured life around my job, hobbies, and social commitments. Jake recently went through a rough period. He lost his job 6 months ago, and shortly after, he lost his apartment due to missed rent payments. He asked me if he could move in temporarily while he got back on his feet. Initially, I said yes, but I clearly set limits. I told him he could stay for up to 2 weeks, that he would contribute to bills if he stayed longer, and that he needed to respect my schedule and household rules. He agreed and seemed grateful. The first few days were fine. Jake was quiet, helped with small chores, and seemed genuinely appreciative. But almost immediately, things started changing. He began staying out late, leaving dishes in the sink, and constantly leaving his clothes scattered around the apartment. I reminded him politely a couple of times about our agreements, but he would shrug it off or apologize without making any real changes. Then, about a week in, he started expecting me to handle all his responsibilities. He asked me to drive him to job interviews, lend him money for groceries, and even help him apply for jobs he should have been handling himself. I helped when I could, but it became overwhelming. He seemed to think that because he was living with me temporarily, I was responsible for all his needs. 2 weeks passed, and he refused to start looking for his own place, claiming he needed more time to get things in order. I reminded him of the agreement and said he needed to either start paying rent or find somewhere else to stay. He got defensive, saying I was being selfish and not supporting family in a time of need. He accused me of not understanding his struggles and implied that I didn't care about him. Over the next few days, the situation deteriorated. He would leave the apartment messy, play loud music while I was working, and bring friends over without asking. I asked him repeatedly to follow the rules, but he ignored me. At one point, he even let his cat into my bedroom, which I specifically told him was off limits because I have severe allergies. I confronted him, and he said I was overreacting and that I should just relax. I reached my breaking point and told him he needed to move out immediately. He was furious, yelling that I was turning my back on family and choosing comfort over brotherhood. He also called our parents, who partially sided with him, saying that I should be more compassionate and that he was in a vulnerable position. My parents and some mutual friends think I was too harsh and that I should have been more flexible. I feel conflicted because I genuinely care about Jake and I understand that he's going through a hard time. But I also feel like I have the right to protect my own space, mental health, and routine. He repeatedly violated agreements, disrespected my boundaries, and expected me to shoulder all his responsibilities. I tried to be patient, offered advice, and help where I could, but he continued to push my limits. Since he moved out, Jake and I have a strained relationship. I want to maintain our bond, but I also can't compromise my well-being again. I offered to help him find affordable housing and assist with budgeting, but he refused, saying I was cold and unsupportive. AITA for refusing to let my brother continue living with me after he repeatedly ignored our agreement, disrespected my space, and expected me to manage all his responsibilities. I feel like I did what I could reasonably do to help while still protecting my life and stability, but my brother, parents, and some friends see me as selfish and unsympathetic. I want to support him without sacrificing my own life, but I'm not sure if I'm handling this correctly. Has anyone else had a family member in crisis who overstepped boundaries while living with you? How did you protect yourself without permanently damaging the relationship? I want to do right by him, but also need to respect my own limits. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious. When do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. AITA for refusing to let my brother's girlfriend move in after they broke up. I, 28F, have always been close to my younger brother, Mark, 25M. We've had our disagreements, like most siblings, but I genuinely care about him and try to support him whenever he needs it. About a year ago, Mark started dating a woman named Jessica, 27F. At first, I was happy for him because he had just come out of a rough breakup and seemed to finally find someone who genuinely made him happy. I met Jessica a few times at family gatherings and dinners, and while we didn't click instantly, I didn't dislike her either. The issue began when Mark and Jessica decided to move in together after dating for about 6 months. I wasn't thrilled about it because Jessica had some history of instability. She moved around a lot, had conflicts with previous roommates, and had financial troubles, but I didn't want to be judgmental. I figured Mark was an adult and could make his own decisions. Fast forward 3 months, and things started going downhill quickly. Mark and Jessica were constantly arguing, sometimes about small things, sometimes about serious matters like finances and future plans. It got to a point where I started noticing Mark looking exhausted and stressed whenever we met. One evening, Mark called me in tears and admitted that he and Jessica had broken up, but were still living together because she didn't have anywhere else to go. I offered him a sympathetic ear, but I knew the real problem was looming. Jessica wanted to move into my apartment. Now, a little context about my living situation. I live alone in a 2-bedroom apartment. I work long hours, have a busy social life, and cherish my privacy. I can host guests occasionally, but I've always been someone who needs her own space to recharge. When Mark first suggested that Jessica could stay with me temporarily until she figures things out, I hesitated. I didn't want to say no outright, but I felt uneasy. After thinking about it, I politely declined and offered to help her find a temporary sublet or a hostel instead. I explained that having her live with me would be stressful and to disrupt my routines. Mark didn't take it well. He said I was being heartless and that family should always support each other. He reminded me that he helped me when I went through a rough patch a few years ago and implied that I owed him this. I tried to explain that my decision wasn't about not helping him. It was about boundaries and the kind of relationship I want in my home. I suggested that I could help in other ways, helping her pack, finding temporary accommodations, giving her some financial advice if needed, and even cooking meals together occasionally. But he was insistent, saying it was the right thing to do for family. Things escalated when Jessica called me directly one evening. She started crying and told me how she had nowhere else to go, that her friends were busy, and she had no savings. She begged me to let her stay for just a week or two. I felt sympathy, of course, but I also felt it would be a huge mistake. I tried to stay calm and repeated my boundaries. I cannot have someone living with me long term. I suggested some alternative options again, like short-term rentals, hostels, or even staying with another friend of hers. She got upset and accused me of being selfish, saying I was prioritizing comfort over family. The next day, Mark came over to argue in person. He raised his voice, saying that I didn't understand what it was like to be in a vulnerable situation and that if the roles were reversed, I would expect him to help. I reminded him that when I had needed help, I had stayed with friends and family, and I never assumed anyone would move in permanently. I told him that I love him and want to support him and even her in other ways. But my apartment was my sanctuary, and having a non-family member live here would make me unhappy. He stormed out and hasn't spoken to me much since, except for passive-aggressive messages asking if Jessica could stay for just a night or a couple of days. My parents have weighed in as well. They say I'm overreacting and that I should be more compassionate, especially since Jessica is going through a rough time. I tried to explain that my compassion doesn't require me to compromise my living situation and mental well-being. I even offered to cover the cost of a few nights in a hotel for her, but they dismiss it as not the same as helping someone in need. I feel stuck because I don't want to hurt Mark or Jessica, but I also can't imagine letting her move in. I'm a private person, and having someone I barely know live in my home, especially when they are upset, stressed, and possibly volatile, is terrifying to me. I also worry about the precedent it sets. If I let her move in now, what stops future friends or acquaintances from expecting the same? I've tried compromise, like letting her stay a night or two, but every time I bring that up, Mark or Jessica pushes for longer. I've even considered taking a short vacation to avoid confrontation, but that feels like avoiding the problem rather than solving it. I'm also concerned about my safety and the tension this could create in my apartment. So Reddit AITA? I feel like I'm setting healthy boundaries and trying to help in ways that don't compromise my life. But my brother and family see me as selfish and unkind. I don't want to lose my relationship with Mark, but I also don't want to live with someone who isn't part of my household. I've been racking my brain for a fair solution that doesn't involve either of us feeling resentful, but I keep coming up short. Have any of you been in a similar situation where you had to refuse a family member's partner from moving in after a breakup? How do you navigate family loyalty versus personal boundaries without it turning into a full-blown feud? I'm open to suggestions, but I need answers that respect both my limits and the fact that Mark and Jessica are clearly in a vulnerable situation. How can I support them without sacrificing my home and mental health? AITA for refusing to attend my sister's wedding because of her fiancé? I, 28F, have always been the responsible one in my family. I work hard, I plan ahead, and I'm careful about my choices. My younger sister, Emily, 24F, on the other hand, has always been more spontaneous, impulsive, and occasionally reckless. We've had our fair share of arguments over the years, but I've always tried to support her, even when I didn't agree with her decisions. That's why this situation has been so difficult for me. Emily got engaged 6 months ago to a man named Jason, 26M. When she first told me, I was cautiously optimistic. I hadn't met him much beyond a few group dinners, but he seemed polite enough. However, over the following months, I started noticing things that made me uncomfortable. It wasn't just little personality quirks. There were behaviors that I genuinely found concerning. He often made jokes at Emily's expense, belittled her career choices, and had a pattern of passive-aggressive comments. On a few occasions, I witnessed him snap at her for minor mistakes in public. My attempts to bring this up to Emily were always met with defensiveness or he's just joking reassurances. The tipping point for me was when Emily asked me to help with the wedding planning. At first, I was excited, but I quickly realized that Jason was taking an unusually controlling role. He insisted on dictating almost every aspect of the wedding, from a guest list to the color of the bridesmaids' dresses. Emily seemed hesitant but acquiesced each time, and I could see her stress levels rising. One evening, she confided in me that she sometimes felt suffocated by his expectations, but she felt obligated to make him happy. I tried to gently remind her that a marriage should be a partnership, not one person's vision enforced on the other, but she would brush it off and say, "I just want this day to be perfect." As the wedding date approached, Jason's behavior became even more controlling. He started pressuring Emily to invite people she didn't really want at the wedding because of his own connections or networking opportunities. He also criticized the catering choices she made, insisted on doing elaborate seating charts that isolated certain friends, and even tried to veto some of the music choices she had already booked. Emily seemed exhausted, but she kept saying, "It's fine, I'll handle it." Last month, Emily officially asked me to be a bridesmaid. At first, I was touched, but I realized that my role might require me to spend a lot of time with Jason as well. I started thinking seriously about whether I could support her day while feeling uncomfortable and tense around her fiancé. I tried to talk to Emily about my concerns one last time. I told her that I felt Jason's behavior was controlling and that it made me uneasy to celebrate with him as a central part of her life. I explained that while I love her and want her to be happy, I could not in good conscience attend a wedding where someone I perceive as manipulative and potentially emotionally abusive is being celebrated. Emily was devastated when I told her I couldn't be a bridesmaid, but I also said I would attend the wedding if it were purely about supporting her without endorsing Jason. She didn't want that compromise and insisted that my refusal made me selfish and unsupportive. She accused me of trying to control her life and making her wedding about me. Our parents got involved, and my mom tried to mediate. I explained my concerns calmly, but my mom said, "You're reading too much into it. Jason is just a little bossy. Everyone knows weddings are stressful." I told them that it wasn't just bossiness. It was consistent patterns of dismissive and controlling behavior that made me uncomfortable around him. My dad, however, said, "If you love your sister, you'll put your feelings aside for one day. I felt blindsided because I truly do love Emily and want her happiness, but I also felt like attending the wedding would be a tacit endorsement of behavior I think is unhealthy. After a tense family meeting, I finally made my decision. I sent Emily a heartfelt message explaining that I could not attend her wedding. I emphasized that this wasn't about me wanting to ruin her day, but about boundaries and my own comfort levels. I told her I loved her and would support her in other ways before and after the wedding, but that I couldn't participate in the ceremony itself. The backlash was immediate. Emily stopped talking to me and has since posted on social media about family members who refuse to celebrate our love. Our parents are upset with me, saying I should forgive and forget and just be there for her big day. Even some extended family members have taken sides, saying I'm making a big deal out of nothing. I felt torn, guilty, and anxious. I don't want to damage my relationship with Emily permanently, but I also feel strongly that attending the wedding would compromise my values and make me complicit in celebrating someone whose behavior I find deeply troubling. I keep thinking maybe I overreacted, maybe Jason isn't as bad as I perceive, or maybe I should just set aside my discomfort for one day. But I also know that boundaries are important and that ignoring red flags can be harmful in the long run. So, Reddit AITA for refusing to attend my sister's wedding because I feel her fiancé's behavior is controlling and potentially abusive. I've tried talking to Emily, our parents, and even close friends, but the judgment keeps coming. I don't want to hurt my sister, but I also need to be honest about my limits. I'm bracing myself for family fallout and emotional strain, but I want to do what feels morally right without being labeled the villain. Has anyone been in a similar situation, where attending a wedding meant compromising your principles or personal boundaries? How did you navigate it without permanently harming family relationships? I could really use some perspective. AITA for causing a huge fight at my sister's wedding over a last-minute seating change. I, 28F, am feeling extremely torn about what happened last weekend, and I honestly don't know if I overreacted or if my family is just being unreasonable. My sister, 31F, recently got married to her fiancé, Mark, 32M, and I was super excited for her. We've always been close, but we also have some tension because of family dynamics, particularly with my parents, who could be very critical and overbearing. The wedding itself was beautiful, and my sister clearly put a lot of effort into everything. She had this gorgeous outdoor ceremony, followed by a dinner reception at a really nice venue. Everything was meticulously planned, including the seating chart. Here's where things started to unravel. So, I have a younger brother, Daniel, 25M, who I'm very close to. Daniel has been in a long-term relationship with his girlfriend, Jessica, 26F, for about 4 years. Jessica is lovely and gets along with the family most of the time, though she has had a few minor disagreements with my parents in the past over holidays and family events. She's not the most outgoing person, and she can be a bit shy in large gatherings, but nothing serious. The seating chart my sister had planned was very organized. She had the bridal party at one table, close family at another, and then extended family and friends at other tables. I was seated at a table with my brother, his girlfriend, and some cousins. That was fine. However, just an hour before dinner was supposed to start, my mom approached my sister and suggested moving Jessica to a different table. The reason given was that Jessica doesn't mingle much and that my mom thought she might feel uncomfortable sitting at a table with all the extroverted family members. My sister, being the kind and accommodating person she is, tried to politely consider it, but said she didn't want to change anything last minute because the tables had name cards and she wanted everyone to feel included. My mom, however, kept insisting, saying it would save Jessica from embarrassment and that it would be awkward if she stayed at our table. My sister finally said she would move Jessica if it was absolutely necessary, which my mom interpreted as a yes. When I found out about the plan to move Jessica, I was furious. Daniel had been talking about how excited he was to sit with all his cousins, and Jessica had specifically mentioned she didn't mind sitting at the table with our family. It felt like my mom was singling her out and treating her like she couldn't handle a normal social setting, which came off as condescending and controlling. I confronted my mom quietly, telling her that Jessica was perfectly capable of sitting with our table and that changing the seating last minute would be rude and embarrassing for her. My mom brushed me off, saying I was overreacting and that it was just a small adjustment to make things easier. I then went to my sister and told her firmly that I didn't want Jessica moved and that it would create tension if my mom's plan went through. My sister looked stressed, but ultimately tried to mediate. She asked my mom to let it go, saying it was unnecessary. My mom, however, became defensive and started raising her voice, saying I was being disrespectful and trying to control her daughter's wedding. At this point, other family members started noticing the argument. Trying not to make a scene, I stepped in and said, "Jessica is an adult. She can sit wherever she wants. Moving her last minute for your convenience is humiliating and unfair. Please respect that." My mom snapped back, telling me I was defending someone who can't even stand up for herself, and that I was being dramatic. The argument escalated quickly, with raised voices and tears from my sister, who was now between us trying to calm everyone down. I eventually lost my temper and told my mom flat out that if she moved Jessica, I would refuse to sit at that table and would spend the rest of the night elsewhere. My dad, who had been quietly watching, stepped in and tried to calm both of us down, but the tension had already spread across the room. Other family members chimed in, some taking my side, some taking my mom's, and what started as a minor seating issue turned into a full-blown family argument in the middle of the reception hall. My sister finally had to intervene in a very firm way. She told my mom to stop pressuring anyone and said that Jessica would remain at our table. My mom reluctantly agreed, but gave me a very icy glare the entire evening. Daniel and Jessica were grateful, but the damage was done. Many guests witnessed part of the argument, and there was an awkward atmosphere at the table for the first hour of dinner. After the wedding, my sister thanked me privately for standing up for Jessica, but also mentioned that my mom was upset and hurt by how I spoke to her. She said she didn't want anyone to hold grudges, but I could tell she was trying to downplay how intense things had gotten. My mom has since sent me a few passive-aggressive texts, saying things like, "I just wanted what was best for everyone," and asking why I had to make a scene. My dad hasn't said much, but I feel the tension in family group chats and at home visits. I'm torn because part of me feels like I did the right thing. Jessica was being treated unfairly, and my mom's insistence felt controlling and humiliating. On the other hand, I know it was my sister's wedding, and my mom's feelings are valid in the sense that she was worried about someone being uncomfortable. I tried to handle it politely at first, but it escalated, and now the whole family is upset. So, AITA for standing up for Jessica and refusing to let my mom move her at the last minute, even though it caused a huge scene at my sister's wedding. AITA for refusing to host my sister's wedding after she insulted my home and my parenting. So this is a long one, and I need to get it off my chest because I've been replaying this in my head nonstop. I, 34F, have a fairly average suburban home that I share with my husband, 36M, and our 2 kids, ages 5 and 8. I work part-time from home, so my life is a constant juggle of professional responsibilities and parenting duties. My sister, 32F, has always been a bit of a perfectionist and has some issues with her entitlement, which is relevant here. She got engaged last year to her fiancé, 33M, who is great, but unfortunately, he tends to go along with whatever my sister wants. When she first got engaged, she casually mentioned that she might want to host her wedding at my house because she loved my backyard and thought it would be perfect for an intimate ceremony. At the time, I laughed and said that while she could have a small gathering at our home, it was going to be tricky because of the kids, the dogs, and our schedules. I also mentioned that it would require a lot of preparation, cleaning, and probably hiring some professionals to pull it off. She brushed it off and said she could handle all of that, and that I just needed to say yes. Fast forward a few months, and she comes over unannounced one Saturday, looking stressed, and says that she's decided her wedding has to be at my house. She brings a binder with Pinterest boards, a detailed budget she's allocated for home upgrades, and a list of demands. She wants our living room repainted, the kitchen counters replaced, and insists that our kids' toys be completely removed for photo aesthetics. She also starts commenting on my home's layout, the furniture and the lighting, making remarks like, "Oh, this couch is a little outdated for wedding photos, and that lamp doesn't really fit the vibe we're going for." I was taken aback because I had just assumed this would be a friendly conversation, not a critique of my entire home. I told her politely that while I was flattered she liked our home, I wasn't comfortable making all of these changes, and honestly, hosting the wedding would be a huge stress for me. She immediately snapped and said, "I can't believe you'd let your personal feelings get in the way of your sister's special day. Don't you love me? Don't you care about how important this is?" I tried to explain that it wasn't about love or care, but about practical limits. I reminded her that I have kids, a part-time job, and my own life, and that hosting a wedding is a huge undertaking. Then came the kicker. She said, "Well, if you won't do it, I guess I can just have it at my cousin's house. But honestly, your home is so much nicer. I mean, it's cute and all, but I wouldn't call it picture perfect. You really should consider being more organized and less cluttered. Maybe this is why you struggle with managing your life. It's like your home reflects you." At that moment, I completely lost it. I told her that not only was it incredibly rude to insult my home and parenting, but that hosting her wedding was never an obligation and that I shouldn't have to feel attacked for setting boundaries. I said that I love her, but she cannot dictate the terms of my life or judge my parenting and lifestyle in the process. She left my house fuming, claiming I was being selfish and ungrateful for not wanting to help her celebrate one of the biggest days of her life. Since then, my parents and some mutual friends have weighed in. My parents think I was too harsh and that family should make sacrifices for one another. Some friends think I was right to set boundaries, but others are saying I should have at least tried to compromise. My sister has refused to speak to me directly, and all of her wedding planning updates on social media are passive-aggressively aimed at me, like posting pictures of venues with captions like, "Not everyone can handle the responsibility of hosting greatness." I've considered whether I overreacted. I could have said yes and tried to make minor accommodations, but the demands she had weren't minor. They were extensive, invasive, and frankly insulting. I also think it's fair to not want to host a large event that would disrupt my family life and require me to turn my home into something it's not. The last conversation we had via text ended with her saying, "I hope someday you understand that family sometimes means putting aside your own comfort for the people you love. Right now, you're choosing furniture and toys over me. I feel completely misunderstood. I love my sister, but I cannot be guilted into turning my home into a wedding venue under her conditions." So, Reddit, AITA for refusing to host my sister's wedding after she insulted my home and my parenting. I feel like I'm standing up for myself, but I also worry that maybe I'm overreacting and being too rigid. AITA for refusing to give my cousin's children a place to stay after they caused trouble in the past. I, 33F, have a cousin, Laura, 35F, who has 3 kids aged 7, 9, and 12. Growing up, we were close, but our families have always had different parenting styles. I live alone in a modest apartment, and I enjoy quiet and structure in my life. Over the years, I've occasionally babysat her kids for short periods, and while I generally like spending time with them, the last time they stayed with me, things got out of control. About 2 years ago, Laura went on a week-long business trip and asked if I could watch the kids. I agreed, thinking it would be manageable, and made sure to set clear rules with her beforehand. They were to respect my home, help with small chores, and follow my routines. I also explained that I wasn't planning on doing full-time childcare for a week, but that I would help them get through mornings and evenings. Almost immediately, the kids disregarded the rules. They ran through my apartment screaming, left crumbs and spills everywhere, and refused to clean up after themselves. I tried redirecting them, but it quickly became exhausting. The youngest broke a lamp, the middle child spilled juice on my carpet, and the oldest repeatedly ignored my instructions. I contacted Laura to explain what was happening, and she said to be patient, it's just a phase, and let them have fun. I tried to enforce some discipline, but without Laura's presence, the kids became more defiant. By the 3rd day, I was overwhelmed. I had to work from home, but the noise and chaos made it impossible to concentrate. The kids also started arguing and fighting with each other, and one of them hit another. I tried separating them and giving them activities, but nothing worked. I even had to take a break from work to deal with an emergency where one of the kids broke a vase while running inside. I realized I was not prepared for full-time supervision of 3 children with high energy levels and little respect for boundaries. I spoke to Laura when she returned and explained my experience. I said that while I enjoyed seeing the kids, I couldn't manage them alone for an extended period, especially in my apartment. I offered to babysit for a few hours at a time or help with activities outside my home, but I made it clear that I could not host them overnight again. Laura seemed disappointed but agreed at the time. Fast forward to last month, Laura asked again if her kids could stay for a week while she attended another trip. I immediately said no, explaining that I couldn't risk another chaotic experience and that it wouldn't be fair to me or them. She became upset, accusing me of being selfish and not helping family in need. She argued that I was their only available relative in the city and that she had no other options. I tried to compromise. I offered to help organize a local daycare, arrange for a friend who has experience with kids to supervise, or help pay for temporary childcare. She refused, insisting that her kids wanted to stay with me and that I was denying them a family experience. I explained again that my apartment isn't set up for 3 kids for a week and that I couldn't manage the responsibility safely. The situation has caused tension within our family. Some relatives think I'm being reasonable and protecting my mental health, while others side with Laura, saying I should make sacrifices for family and that I'm too rigid. I feel guilty because I do care about my cousin and her children, but I also know my limits. I cannot put myself in a situation that could lead to stress, property damage, or harm to anyone involved. AITA for refusing to let my cousin's children stay with me again after a previous experience went poorly. I've tried to offer alternatives and help in ways that don't involve hosting them full-time, but Laura insists that staying with me is the only solution. I want to maintain a good relationship with her and her kids, but I also need to respect my boundaries and protect my home and well-being. Has anyone else had relatives who repeatedly asked for childcare that exceeded your capacity? How did you handle saying no while keeping family relationships intact? I want to support my cousin without compromising my safety, sanity, and living situation. AITA for refusing to help my sister move after she treated me unfairly for years? This is a long story, so bear with me. I, 32F, have a younger sister, Emily, 28F, and over the years, our relationship has been complicated. Growing up, Emily was always the golden child in our family. She got straight A's, won awards, and was generally the favorite of our parents. I, on the other hand, struggled with school and was considered the troublemaker, although most of it was just typical teenage rebellion. As a result, I often felt overlooked and undervalued, but I tried to maintain a relationship with her. I thought we could grow closer as adults. When Emily graduated college, she moved to a different state and started a career in finance. We kept in touch sporadically, but I felt like she would only contact me when she needed something or to show off her accomplishments. She would brag about promotions, vacations, or her new apartment, but never asked about my life in detail. I tried to be supportive, but I started noticing a pattern where she seemed dismissive of my struggles and would criticize me for small things. Fast forward a few years, I finally got a stable job and moved into my own apartment. I was excited and reached out to Emily to share the news. She responded with a short, "Cool," and that was it. I felt hurt, but brushed it off. Around this time, I started to notice a pattern with her friends and social media. Emily liked to show off her generosity online, posting pictures of herself helping friends move, buying lavish gifts for birthdays, and hosting parties. I always noticed these posts but never commented because I felt a little jealous, but mostly sad that she didn't extend any of that generosity to me. I chalked it up to our long-standing family dynamic and tried to focus on my own life. 2 months ago, Emily called me out of the blue. She had decided to move again, this time closer to our parents, and she wanted me to help her with the move. She mentioned it casually, like it was a given that I would drop everything to assist. I work a demanding job, and the timing she proposed was the weekend before a major work deadline. I explained my situation and offered to help in smaller ways, like packing boxes ahead of time or helping her find movers, but she insisted I come in person to lift heavy furniture and stay the entire weekend. I reminded her about all the times she dismissed me or ignored my milestones, and that I didn't feel respected in our relationship. She responded by saying I was being dramatic and selfish, and that she had helped me plenty of times in the past, which wasn't true. She went on about how families should always support each other, and that by refusing to help, I was damaging our relationship. I tried to compromise, suggesting we hire movers and I could contribute financially or help organize, but she refused. She accused me of holding grudges and said I was stuck in the past. I felt frustrated and unappreciated. I decided not to go. I told her politely that I couldn't make it due to my work and that I could help in the ways I mentioned. The day she moved, she posted pictures on social media of her friends helping her carry everything and tagged me, which felt passive-aggressive. I didn't comment, but she sent me a long message complaining that I had let her down and that I didn't care about family. She even mentioned that if I didn't start being more supportive, our relationship would never recover. After this, I reached out to my parents, hoping to get some perspective. They were sympathetic, but reminded me that family bonds are important. They suggested I might be overreacting and should consider helping Emily to maintain harmony. I explained how her behavior over the years has made me feel overlooked and hurt, and that her expectations now seemed unfair. They acknowledged my feelings, but still expressed disappointment in my decision not to move heavy furniture for her. The tension has escalated. Emily has barely spoken to me since her move. She sends passive-aggressive messages and occasional guilt trips like, "Hope you're not too busy to care about family," or "Some people would do anything for their sister." I feel stuck because part of me wants to reconcile, but another part resents being treated like I owe her unconditional help after years of feeling dismissed. I even considered going over just to smooth things over, but I know it would make me feel resentful and wouldn't resolve the underlying issues. I've reflected a lot on my own role, trying to see if I overreacted. Maybe I could have done more to help financially or organize things. Maybe I could have communicated differently. But emotionally, I feel like my refusal was justified because she was asking me to physically do something I couldn't manage without feeling significant resentment. I'm worried that our relationship might never return to normal. But I also feel that giving in would send a message that it's okay for her to dismiss and belittle me whenever she wants help. I want to maintain boundaries, but I don't want to be seen as cruel or uncaring. So, AITA for refusing to help my sister move after all the years of her being dismissive and critical toward me. I want to support family in meaningful ways, but I also feel like my emotional health matters. I just don't know how to balance that with the pressure to conform to her expectations of what a good sister should do. I haven't spoken to her directly since the move, and I'm unsure if I should try to mend things or let her come around on her own. I don't want to escalate the conflict further, but I also don't want to compromise my boundaries and self-respect. AITA, I-32F, have always been someone who values my independence and my own space. So when I met my boyfriend, Jake 34M, I was honest about my need for privacy and boundaries. We've been together for 3 years, living together for 2. I thought we had a solid understanding, but a recent incident with his family has thrown everything into chaos. Jake comes from a very close-knit family. He's one of 3 siblings, all of whom are very involved in each other's lives. At first, I thought it was sweet, but over time, it's become a little suffocating. Jake's parents are in their 60s, retired, and have the habit of popping by unannounced. I've tried to set boundaries, but every time I bring it up, Jake says I'm being unreasonable or too rigid. I usually give in because I love him and want to maintain peace. About 6 months ago, Jake's parents decided they were going to renovate their kitchen and wanted to stay with us for a week while the work was being done. They didn't ask if it was okay, they just assumed we would say yes. I expressed my concern that we needed our own time and that our apartment isn't huge, but Jake brushed it off. He said, "It's only a week, come on, what's the big deal?" I reluctantly agreed. During that week, things were rough. They rearranged furniture, criticized the way I cook, and generally acted as if they were running the house. I felt my boundaries were completely ignored. Jake didn't back me up at all, saying he wanted to avoid conflict. By the end of the week, I was exhausted, frustrated, and felt like my home was no longer my own. A month after that, I thought things would settle down, but Jake's sister, Melissa, 36F, announced she was getting divorced and needed a place to stay temporarily. Jake immediately offered our apartment for a couple of weeks. I told him I wasn't comfortable with that. I explained that having 2 weeks of constant visitors while I work from home and try to manage my life was not feasible. Jake argued that it was family, and I was being selfish. I tried to compromise, suggesting she stay at a hotel or we find another solution, but Jake insisted. 2 weeks later, Melissa arrived with her 2 kids, ages 5 and 7. Our apartment was instantly chaotic. I had to work from home, and with 2 energetic kids running around, it was nearly impossible to concentrate. I tried to stay calm, but one evening, after a particularly stressful day, I asked Melissa to supervise the kids in the living room so I could finish my work. She refused, saying, "Jake said I can let them do whatever they want. Relax." That set off a fight between me and Jake that lasted for hours. I eventually told him that I could not continue living like this, that our home needs to be a sanctuary for both of us, not a hotel for every family crisis. I suggested that if he values his family's needs over mine, maybe we need to reconsider how we live together. Jake became defensive, saying I was being dramatic and unsympathetic. The argument escalated until I said something I now regret. "It feels like your family comes before me. Always." Jake left the room, and Melissa and her kids stayed in the apartment for another week. The following weekend, Jake's parents arrived again. This time, they had a major health scare, and Jake wanted me to cancel plans to take care of them. I refused, explaining that I had commitments I couldn't break and that my boundaries were being disregarded repeatedly. Jake called me cold and uncaring, and the tension between us has been unbearable ever since. I ended up staying at a friend's apartment for a few days to get space and think. During that time, Jake sent me multiple messages saying that if I can't accept his family in my life, maybe our relationship isn't going to work. I feel torn. On one hand, I love him and have always tried to be accommodating. But on the other hand, I feel like my boundaries and my right to have a home where I feel safe and respected are constantly being violated. We've had several more arguments, each one worse than the last. Jake's family has started to distance themselves from me because I don't get it and don't understand family. I feel like I'm constantly defending myself for wanting basic privacy and respect in my own home. I've tried therapy, setting clear expectations, and even making small compromises, but nothing seems to be enough. A few days ago, Jake suggested we move closer to his parents so that they could be more involved in our lives. I told him I cannot do that. I don't want to live next door to people who have repeatedly disregarded my comfort and my boundaries. Jake got angry and accused me of being controlling and selfish. He said that a healthy relationship involves compromise, and I told him that compromise works both ways. When one person consistently sacrifices their peace and boundaries while the other's family takes priority, that is not compromise. Now, friends and family are split on the issue. Some say I'm being unreasonable and that family should always come first. Others say I have the right to my own home and that I shouldn't have to tolerate being treated like a guest in my own space. Jake says I've made him choose between me and his family, which he sees as unfair. I feel like I've made it clear that I'm not asking him to cut off his family, only that they respect the boundaries we set together in our home. At this point, I feel like I'm at crossroads. I love Jake, but I also need to protect my own mental health and personal space. I'm exhausted from constantly negotiating, defending, and compromising in a situation that seems never-ending. I've tried to explain that my requests are reasonable, but Jake perceives them as a personal attack on his family. I don't want to lose him, but I also can't continue living in a way where my home is no longer my own. So, Reddit AITA for wanting my own home and boundaries respected over accommodating Jake's family whenever they need it. I feel like a reasonable person should be able to have personal space and privacy, but Jake and his family see it as selfishness. Have I really crossed the line? Or is it okay to stand firm on something as fundamental as my own home? Hey friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what could be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. AITA for refusing to let my sister's fiancé plan my wedding. I've, 28F, been with my fiancé, Jake, 30M, for about 5 years, and we finally decided to tie the knot. From the beginning, we agreed we wanted a small, intimate wedding with close family and friends, nothing extravagant or over the top. I grew up in a pretty modest household, and I've always been someone who values simplicity. Jake and I are aligned in that way, so we were excited to start planning something that reflected us. The problem started with my older sister, Melissa, 32F. Melissa has always been a bit of a control freak when it comes to events. Even as kids, she would plan birthday parties for the whole family and expect everyone to fall in line with her ideas. She's now engaged to her fiancé, Daniel, 34M, who is, well, he's very much the quiet sidekick to Melissa. He doesn't make decisions on his own and mostly goes along with whatever Melissa says. They both have a flair for extravagant events and tend to plan things far beyond anyone else's budget. When Jake and I announced our engagement last year, Melissa immediately started volunteering herself to help plan. I politely declined at first, explaining that we wanted to keep it small and simple. She brushed it off and insisted that she had so many ideas that would make the day perfect. I tried to set boundaries, but she kept pushing. It was manageable until Daniel got involved. About 6 months ago, Daniel emailed me with a long, detailed proposal of what he thought our wedding should look like. I assumed it was a joke at first because he included things like hiring a live orchestra for the ceremony. We're not classical music people, renting a historical mansion instead of the small country inn we wanted, and having a 12-tier cake. I laughed it off and explained politely that this wasn't what we had in mind. Daniel didn't respond, but Melissa immediately confronted me, saying that Daniel's plan was amazing and that I was being unreasonable for not considering it. From that point, it turned into a full-blown conflict. Melissa and Daniel started sending unsolicited emails, text messages, and even showing up at our house with binders full of wedding ideas. Every time I tried to discuss the wedding with Jake, he got stressed because he didn't want to hurt his future in-laws' feelings. I tried to handle it diplomatically at first, suggesting that maybe they could plan a separate bridal shower or rehearsal dinner, but they insisted on being involved in every decision, from the flowers to the table settings to the menu. It felt like they were trying to hijack our wedding entirely. The breaking point came when Daniel sent me a 45-slide presentation of the ultimate wedding experience. It included a full schedule of events spanning 3 days, color-coded seating charts, and multiple wardrobe changes for all guests. I finally snapped and told Melissa and Daniel in no uncertain terms that this wedding was about Jake and me, and if they couldn't respect that, they were welcome to skip it entirely. Melissa cried, accused me of being selfish, and said that I was ruining the family by not letting them contribute. Daniel stayed silent, which was actually a relief. After that confrontation, Melissa went to my parents and tried to turn them against me, claiming I was being unreasonable and that I was shutting out family. My parents, who usually side with me, expressed concern that I was being too rigid and suggested I compromise somehow. I explained to them that compromise doesn't mean letting someone else plan my wedding against my wishes, but they were uneasy. Now, there's tension in the family. Melissa has stopped speaking to me directly, and Daniel seems hurt even though he didn't really say much. Meanwhile, Jake is supportive of me, but frustrated by the stress this has caused. I feel like I'm being blamed for setting boundaries and standing up for the kind of wedding Jake and I want. I understand that family wants to be involved and contribute, but when it crosses the line into dictating every detail, it stops being helpful. I also feel like Melissa and Daniel are conflating their personal taste with what is right for our wedding, and it's unfair to make us conform to that. I'm considering hiring a professional wedding planner who can act as a buffer, but I also worry it won't fix the tension entirely. So, AITA for refusing to let my sister's fiancé plan my wedding and telling them firmly that this is our day, not theirs. I want to emphasize that I've tried to be polite and compromise where possible, like suggesting they help with a single event or task, but they refused any limitation on their involvement. I also made it clear that attendance is optional if they can't respect our wishes. My concern is that some people might view my stance as extreme, but I honestly feel it's about protecting my wedding experience and our autonomy as a couple. Has anyone been through a similar situation where in-laws or family try to take over wedding planning? I would appreciate perspective on whether my approach is fair or if I should consider another way to manage this without escalating the family conflict further. AITA for refusing to let my sister's fiancé plan our family vacation without consulting me. I, 35F, have a sister, Anna, 32F, and we've always been close. Our parents live out of state, and every summer, our family gets together for a vacation that we usually plan collaboratively. For the last several years, the planning has been fairly democratic. Each person contributes ideas, and we vote on activities, lodging, and schedules. I've always been excited about these trips because they allow us to reconnect, and I take the planning seriously since I often organize logistics like transportation, meal prep, and reservations. Anna recently got engaged to a man named Chris, 34M, who has been part of our family gatherings for a few years. He's personable and well-meaning, but I've noticed he can be a bit controlling, especially when it comes to planning. A few weeks ago, Anna told me that Chris wanted to plan this year's family vacation almost entirely by himself. She said he wanted to take the lead and make it special for everyone, which at first sounded fine. However, I soon realized he expected me to follow along with whatever he decided, and he made several assumptions without consulting anyone. Chris started booking lodging, excursions, and even restaurants without asking for input from me or our parents. I discovered that he had already made deposits for activities that conflicted with schedules I had previously coordinated, including a boat tour my father had wanted to attend and a cabin that wouldn't accommodate all of us comfortably. I emailed him and Anna to clarify that these plans wouldn't work for everyone and suggested adjusting the schedule collaboratively, but he dismissed my concerns. He said that he had taken the responsibility and that I should trust his judgment since he wanted everything to be perfect. I tried to compromise, offering suggestions for alternative activities and explaining why certain plans wouldn't accommodate everyone. He became defensive and said I was micromanaging and trying to ruin the surprise. I reminded him that it wasn't about surprise or perfection. It was about making sure all family members, including my father, mother, and younger cousins, could participate safely and comfortably. Chris responded by saying that I was overreacting and that he knew best. Anna encouraged me to be patient, saying Chris meant well and wanted to impress the family. I explained that I wasn't opposed to him contributing, but that unilateral planning was inappropriate when this is a family event that affects multiple people. She acknowledged my point, but said I should go along with it for once to avoid conflict. As the vacation dates approached, Chris continued to make decisions without consulting anyone. He booked a resort that was farther away than necessary, ignored dietary restrictions for family members, and signed us up for activities that some relatives physically couldn't participate in. I had to intervene multiple times, contacting vendors to cancel or adjust reservations and rebooking activities in a way that accommodated everyone. Every time I tried to assert input, Chris accused me of being controlling and undermining him. Finally, I told Anna that I could not allow Chris to continue planning the vacation entirely on his own. I explained that I would participate in planning collaboratively as in previous years, but that no one could make unilateral decisions that affected everyone. Anna became upset, saying I was souring the trip and not letting him help. Chris accused me of being selfish and controlling, claiming I was unable to trust others to do anything right. Our family is now split. Some members agree that Chris overstepped and that I was justified in enforcing collaborative planning. Others say I was too rigid and should have let him take the lead for the sake of harmony. I feel frustrated because I tried to be reasonable, offered compromises, and attempted to work with him. But he ignored boundaries and expected me to defer entirely. AITA for refusing to let my sister's fiancé plan our family vacation without consulting me and others. I feel like I'm defending not only my own boundaries, but also the interests and comfort of multiple family members. I want everyone to enjoy the trip, but I also want planning to be fair and inclusive. Has anyone else dealt with a family member or partner taking over planning for a shared event? How did you maintain boundaries without creating long-term resentment? I want the vacation to be enjoyable for everyone, but I also need to assert my role in ensuring it runs smoothly. AITA for refusing to forgive my brother after he ruined my wedding over a bet? I've always been close with my family, especially my younger brother, Alex. We grew up in a fairly tight-knit household, and despite the usual sibling rivalries, we were genuinely supportive of each other. That said, Alex has always had a mischievous streak and a penchant for impulsive decisions, which has gotten him into trouble more times than I can count. I should probably mention that I've always been the more responsible sibling, the planner, the one who sticks to commitments, while Alex is the free spirit, often living in the moment without thinking about long-term consequences. The story starts about a year ago when I got engaged to my fiancé, Michael. I've been dreaming about my wedding since I was a kid, meticulously imagining every detail, and I was determined to make it a perfect day, not in an extravagant sense, but in the sense that everything would go smoothly and everyone we cared about would have a good time. Alex, on the other hand, has never been a fan of formal events or anything that required him to be serious. He'd always been more the life of the party type, the one who thrives on chaos and adrenaline. I love him, but I knew that having him in the middle of my meticulously planned wedding could be a risk. Fast forward to 2 months before the wedding. I was finalizing vendors, seating charts, and the timeline for the day. One evening, Alex came over, and after a couple of beers, he told me about this crazy bet he'd made with his friend, Jake, who is known for being equally reckless. The bet was that Alex could cause a little harmless chaos at my wedding and get away with it without anyone noticing that he was behind it. He insisted it was all in good fun, and he swore that he wouldn't do anything to ruin my day, just minor pranks like switching the napkins or putting the flowers in the wrong place. I tried to laugh it off and told him that I trusted him, but deep down I felt uneasy. I asked him to just promise me he wouldn't do anything at the wedding that could genuinely upset anyone. He said he would. The wedding day came, and initially, everything seemed normal. The ceremony went off without a hitch. The venue looked perfect, the guests were all happy, and Michael and I were thrilled. But then the reception started. The first sign that something was off came when the appetizers were being served. The caterers started frantically switching plates around, and a few guests whispered about how some dishes were missing ingredients or had strange additions. I shrugged it off at first, thinking it was just a fluke or a mix-up with the catering staff. It quickly escalated. The DJ, who was supposed to play a very specific playlist that Michael and I had spent weeks curating, suddenly started skipping tracks and playing songs that had nothing to do with the event. My mother's floral centerpiece was knocked over, and a significant number of the flowers ended up scattered across the floor, some of them trampled. A few close friends were given wrong seating assignments, which caused confusion and minor arguments at the tables. My photographer nearly missed the cake cutting because Alex somehow managed to move the cake table to a completely different location. By the time the toast came, it was clear to everyone that things were going wrong at an alarming rate. I confronted Alex quietly, asking him if he had anything to do with it. At first, he laughed nervously, saying he didn't do anything serious, and I could tell he was lying. After a few minutes of pressing, he finally admitted to the bet, claiming that he only wanted to create minor mischief and that he didn't expect it to snowball into chaos. I was furious. Michael was furious. My parents were speechless. The entire day I had envisioned was completely disrupted because of his childish actions. People tried to laugh it off, but many of our family and friends left early, citing the disorganized events and general chaos as their reason. The one thing I had wanted from this day was to celebrate love, friendship, and family without any drama. Alex turned it into a nightmare. After the wedding, I told Alex that I couldn't forgive him for what he had done, at least not right away. I didn't want to see him or speak to him, and I asked my parents to keep him away from Michael and me for a while. My parents were torn because they loved both of us, but they also understood why I felt betrayed. Alex kept sending messages apologizing and saying he didn't mean for things to get out of hand, but I couldn't get past the fact that he deliberately put a bet over my happiness. Months have passed, And while some of the family thinks I should forgive him, I feel like that would undermine my feelings and the gravity of what he did. He destroyed something that was supposed to be one of the happiest days of my life for the sake of a foolish wager. I've tried explaining this to him, but he insists that I'm overreacting and that he's my brother, so I should let it go. I don't know if I'm being too harsh by refusing to forgive him. I love him, and I want a relationship with him, but the level of betrayal here feels insurmountable. Michael supports me completely and thinks Alex's actions were inexcusable. My friends are split. Some say I should move on and forgive my brother, while others say I'm right to be upset. So, AITA for refusing to forgive my brother after he ruined my wedding over a bet? AITA for refusing to let my brother stay with me indefinitely after he lost his job and apartment? I, 34F, have a younger brother, Kevin, 28M, who I've always tried to support, but he's never been great with finances or planning ahead. I live alone in a 2-bedroom apartment in the city, which I've worked hard to afford. I value my space, routine, and stability. Kevin recently lost his job and, as a result, his apartment. He asked if he could move in temporarily while he got back on his feet. At first, I agreed under very specific conditions. He could stay for 2 weeks, he needed to contribute to bills if he stayed longer, and he had to follow my house rules. I also made it clear that he couldn't expect me to run errands or handle his responsibilities for him. He said he understood and seemed genuinely grateful. The first few days were manageable. Kevin helped with some chores, stayed quiet while I was working, and didn't complain much. But by the 4th day, things began to unravel. He started leaving dishes in the sink, clothes on the floor, and taking long showers during my work hours. I reminded him politely of our agreement, but he shrugged it off and said he was stressed and needed to relax. Soon, he began asking for money to cover food, transportation, and other expenses, despite my insistence that he should budget carefully and contribute if his stay exceeded the 2-week limit. I refused to give him additional money, explaining that I had my own financial obligations. He became upset and accused me of being selfish and unsupportive. By the end of the first week, Kevin had invited friends over without asking, left the apartment messy, and even broke one of my chairs while moving furniture around. I confronted him and reminded him that these behaviors violated our agreement and that he needed to either start paying rent or find another place. He got defensive, saying I was turning my back on family and making his life impossible. I tried to negotiate compromises. I offered to help him find a cheaper apartment, research temporary housing, or assist with job applications. He rejected all of these alternatives, insisting that living with me was the only viable option. He said I was overreacting and that he couldn't survive without my help. The situation escalated over the 2nd week. Kevin refused to follow my schedule, often staying out late and returning with friends, leaving the apartment loud and cluttered. He criticized my rules as too strict and accused me of not caring about him. I became exhausted and stressed, struggling to work and maintain my home while also dealing with his behavior. Finally, I told him he needed to move out immediately. He yelled that I was cruel and choosing comfort over family. He also contacted our parents, who were upset with me and accused me of being unsympathetic, though they also recognized that his behavior was problematic. Since he moved out, our relationship has been tense. Kevin has been distant, sending passive-aggressive messages and implying that I abandoned him when he needed me. Our parents have tried to mediate, suggesting that I should have been more accommodating, but I feel that I had no choice. His actions repeatedly violated our agreement, and my home and peace of mind were compromised. I feel conflicted because I genuinely care about Kevin and want him to succeed, but I also have to protect my own stability, finances, and mental health. I try to set reasonable boundaries, offer support, and maintain fairness, but he ignored them and expected me to take full responsibility for his well-being. AITA for refusing to let my brother stay with me indefinitely after he lost his job and apartment, given that he repeatedly ignored our agreement, disrespected my home, and expected me to manage all his responsibilities? I want to help him and maintain our relationship, but I cannot compromise my own life and boundaries to accommodate him. Has anyone else dealt with a family member in crisis who Overstep boundaries while living with them? How did you protect yourself without permanently damaging the relationship? I want to support him, but I also need to maintain my own stability and peace of mind. AITA for refusing to let my sister's boyfriend stay at my house after he insulted my cooking. So, this is a bit long, but I really need an outsider perspective because my family is acting like I'm being unreasonable. I, 28F, have a younger sister, Mia, 24F, and we've always been close. Our relationship has had the usual ups and downs, but overall, we've supported each other through college, first jobs, heartbreaks, you name it. I've always been someone who loves hosting and cooking, and my apartment is kind of my sanctuary. I take pride in it and love sharing it with people I care about, which is why I've always happily welcomed my sister's friends or boyfriends for short visits. About a month ago, Mia started dating a guy named Josh, 26M. At first, I was neutral. I didn't know him well, but she seemed genuinely happy. Josh had visited a couple of times before, and everything was fine. I'm not super close to him, but I try to be polite. Then came this weekend. Mia called me Thursday afternoon, practically begging me to let Josh stay over at my place Friday night. She said their plans fell through, and they needed somewhere to crash for the night. I wasn't thrilled because I had a lot of things planned for the weekend, including cooking a new recipe I've been excited to try, and some work I had to finish. I told her honestly that Friday wouldn't be good for me and suggested Saturday instead. Mia sounded frustrated but reluctantly agreed. Friday evening, around 7 p.m., my doorbell rang. I was confused because I hadn't expected anyone. I opened the door, and there was Mia with Josh, both smiling. Mia said they thought they could swing by for a quick visit before dinner, and I immediately felt my stress spike. I told them I wasn't prepared for guests and had things to finish. Mia pouted a little, but Josh smiled and said, "We just thought we'd hang out for a bit. No big deal." I told them I couldn't host that night, that I needed to stick to my plans, and that they were welcome to come Saturday instead. That's when things started to get uncomfortable. Josh's smile dropped, and he said, "Well, that's kind of rude, don't you think? You're her sister. Can't you just be a little flexible?" I explained my position again calmly, but he started huffing and rolling his eyes. Mia jumped in, trying to mediate, saying, "Come on, sis, it's just one night. We'll be gone early. Don't be such a hard ass." I told him firmly that my apartment isn't a hotel and that I had plans, and I wasn't comfortable hosting that night. They left eventually, but the tension lingered. I was upset, but thought maybe things would smooth out by Saturday, when I had offered them the alternative. Saturday afternoon, Mia called me to confirm they'd come over. I was ready to host that day, and had even prepped some snacks and set up a little mini dinner. When they arrived, Josh immediately started making comments about the food. I had prepared a homemade pasta dish with a sauce I perfected over a week. He tasted it and said, "This is interesting. Not really my style, I guess." I was stunned. I didn't know how to respond politely, so I said, "Well, everyone has different tastes." Mia laughed nervously, and Josh continued, "I mean, it's kind of bland, don't you think? And the texture is off. Are you sure you cooked it long enough?" I froze. I couldn't believe someone would openly insult a meal I spent hours preparing. I told him calmly but firmly that I put a lot of work into it, and that I expected basic courtesy from guests. He smirked and said, "I'm just giving honest feedback. You shouldn't take it personally." Mia looked embarrassed, and I felt my patience snap. I said, "No, I won't tolerate disrespect in my own home. If you can't be polite, you're not staying here anymore." Josh looked surprised and laughed, saying, "Wow, you're really dramatic, aren't you?" That was the last straw. I told them both to leave. They stormed out, and Mia sent me a flurry of messages apologizing, but also saying I overreacted and that Josh didn't mean anything by it. She said he was just being honest and doesn't like people who take life too seriously. I didn't respond immediately. That night, I felt anxious and irritated because I hate conflict, especially with my sister. I waited until Sunday morning and then sent Mia a message. "I love you, but I won't tolerate anyone insulting me in my home, whether it's intentional or not." She responded by saying I was controlling and making things awkward and accused me of being hostile for no reason. She also mentioned that Josh had confided in her that he feels uncomfortable around me now. Over the next few days, family members started chiming in. My mom said, "Maybe you should just let it slide. He's your sister's boyfriend. It's not worth losing her over a dinner." My dad said I should have lightened up and not made a big deal out of a little comment. My friends, on the other hand, supported me, saying that nobody should insult them in their own home and that Josh's behavior was rude. Now, my sister is barely talking to me. She keeps trying to text and call, but I either don't answer or I respond briefly. Josh hasn't reached out since. My other sister and a couple of cousins think I'm in the wrong and that I overreacted. I feel like I was just defending my space and my dignity. I love my sister, but I feel like she's prioritizing her boyfriend over me and normal boundaries. AITA for refusing to let my sister's boyfriend stay at my house and for kicking them out after he insulted my cooking? Or am I justified in protecting my home and my feelings? I feel like I might be too sensitive, but at the same time, it's my home, and I should be able to set standards for how people treat me there. I know family dynamics are complicated, but this whole situation has made me question whether I'm being too harsh or if my sister and her boyfriend are being disrespectful. I want to repair things eventually, but I also don't want to compromise on basic respect in my own home. Any advice or judgment would really help. AITA for refusing to give my sister-in-law my wedding dress after she ruined hers. I, 28F, have been with my fiancé, Mark, 30M, for 6 years. We've been planning our wedding for over a year now, and everything has been going smoothly until last weekend. The issue started with my sister-in-law, Rachel, 27F, who is Mark's younger sister. Rachel and I have never had the closest relationship. We're friendly enough, but there's a lot of underlying tension between us. She's always been a bit competitive, and she tends to overstep boundaries, which has caused some friction. When I first got engaged, I told Rachel that I wanted a small, intimate wedding with family and close friends. I also told her that I would be wearing a classic, vintage-inspired wedding dress that I've been dreaming about for years. A few months later, Rachel started dropping hints about how she hadn't found her perfect dress yet. I didn't think much of it first, but then she asked if she could borrow my dress for a photo shoot she wanted to do with her friends before the wedding. I politely declined, explaining that it was my wedding dress, and I wanted to keep it pristine until the big day. Rachel seemed a little annoyed, but didn't push the issue. Fast forward to last weekend. My bridal party and I were having a dress fitting for my wedding. Rachel somehow got wind of the fact that I was trying on my final dress, and she accidentally showed up at the boutique. I say accidentally because she claimed she was just passing by, but her timing was extremely suspicious. While I was getting the final fittings, she kept hovering, making comments about how her dress wasn't nearly as nice as mine and how she wished she could look that amazing. I tried to stay polite and reminded her that this was my day and my dress, but she kept pushing. Then came the moment that triggered everything. Rachel told me that she had a last-minute event for which she needed a stunning outfit, and she really wanted to borrow my wedding dress. She insisted that it would be just for a few hours, and that she would take the utmost care of it. I firmly said no. I explained again that it was my wedding dress, and that I had been waiting for this moment for years. I even offered to help her look for similar dresses or suggested renting one for her event, but she refused every alternative. Her reaction was intense. She started crying, accusing me of being selfish and claiming that I didn't care about family. She said that as her sister-in-law, I should be willing to share my dress since it was a family event and no one would even notice the difference. At that point, I realized that reasoning with her was pointless, so I walked away to finish my fittings. Later that evening, I got a frantic call from Mark. Rachel had somehow taken the dress from the boutique when I wasn't looking. The boutique staff said she borrowed it without permission and promised to return it in perfect condition. I was horrified. I rushed over, and when I confronted her, she admitted she had it and said she needed it for the event tonight. I asked her repeatedly to give it back, explaining that this was theft and that I could press charges if necessary. She claimed that I was overreacting and that she would be careful. I spent the entire night trying to get my dress back. Eventually, she returned it, but not before spilling wine on the hem and ripping a small part of the lace during a clumsy attempt to adjust the fit. I was devastated. I cried for hours, not just because of the damage, but because my sister-in-law had completely disregarded my feelings and my boundaries. Mark was furious with her, and so was my mother, but Rachel insisted that I was the one being unreasonable. She even accused me of ruining her social life because I refused to share a family heirloom. Since then, I've been dealing with the aftermath. The boutique offered to repair the dress, but the damage is permanent in some areas. I feel violated and disrespected. I've told Mark that I don't want Rachel involved in any part of the wedding planning from now on, including the rehearsal dinner, but he's caught between his sister and me. He's tried to mediate, but Rachel keeps sending passive-aggressive texts, and Mark says he's stressed trying to keep the peace. Our families are now split on the issue. My family thinks Rachel was completely out of line and that I have every right to protect my dress. Mark's parents, however, are telling me that I should forgive and forget because it's Rachel and family drama is inevitable. I feel like forgiving her without consequences would send the wrong message, but at the same time, I don't want this incident to cast a shadow over my wedding. I've considered uninviting her from the wedding entirely, but I know that would create even more tension. At the same time, I don't want her anywhere near me or my dress. I feel torn because this was supposed to be one of the happiest times of my life, but it's been overshadowed by family conflict. So, AITA for refusing to lend my wedding dress and for cutting Rachel off from the wedding after she ruined it. I feel like my boundaries were completely reasonable and that she crossed a serious line, but my fiancé and his family seem to think I'm being too harsh. I just want to know if I overreacted or if it's completely valid to protect something so personal, especially after what she did. AITA for refusing to lend my friend money after she spent the first loan irresponsibly. I, 32F, have a friend, Jessica, 31F, whom I've known for over 10 years. We've been very close, and I've always tried to help her out when she's in tough spots. Jessica has struggled with money management for a long time, and while I've tried to support her in ways that don't put me at risk, she often relies on me financially. About 6 months ago, she approached me asking to borrow $2,000 to cover her rent because she had fallen behind due to an unexpected medical expense. I was hesitant, but I agreed because I trusted her and wanted to help. I made it clear that this was a loan, not a gift, and that I expected her to pay me back within 3 months. We even drafted a simple agreement outlining the repayment plan. At first, she made small payments, but after 2 months, she started missing installments and giving excuses about bills, groceries, and other priorities. I reminded her multiple times that she needed to stick to the repayment plan, but she said she needed more time and promised she would catch up. I was patient, but the payments were inconsistent and often delayed. 2 months ago, Jessica came to me again asking for another $1,500 because her car had broken down. She explained that she couldn't get a loan from a bank due to her credit and pleaded with me to help. I immediately felt uneasy. She still owed me the first loan, and there was no guarantee she would repay a second one. I calmly told her that I couldn't lend her more money until she had fully repaid the first loan. I suggested alternatives. She could borrow from family, explore a small personal loan, or cut expenses until she got back on track. Jessica became very upset. She accused me of being selfish, saying that friends are supposed to support each other, and that I was letting her fail. She implied that I was more concerned about money than our friendship. She also said I was mean and uncaring, which hurt because I've tried to be generous and supportive for years. I explained that my concern was not about refusing to help her at all, but about protecting myself from financial risk and ensuring accountability. Over the following weeks, our friendship became tense. Jessica has been distant, passive-aggressive, and occasionally brought up the loans in front of mutual friends to imply I was unreasonable. Some friends have sided with her, saying that I should just help again and that I'm being too rigid. Others think I was right to set boundaries and not enable her financial irresponsibility. I felt stressed and conflicted because I genuinely care about her, but I also have to prioritize my own financial stability. I've tried to help her in other ways. I've offered to help her budget, research financial assistance programs, and look for part-time work to help cover expenses. She refuses these alternatives, insisting that the only solution is for me to lend her more money. I feel guilty because I don't want to lose her as a friend, but I also feel manipulated and pressured. Lending her more money would likely repeat the same cycle and put me at risk. AITA for refusing to lend my friend a second loan after she mismanaged the first one. I feel like I've been fair, patient, and responsible by trying to enforce repayment and offer alternative forms of support. Jessica, however, and some friends see me as selfish and uncaring. I want to maintain our friendship while protecting myself, but I'm unsure how to navigate the situation without causing more tension or permanently damaging the relationship. Has anyone else had a friend repeatedly ask for money despite mismanaging previous loans? How did you set boundaries while maintaining the friendship? I want to support her in ways that don't put my own life at risk, but she seems unwilling to accept help that isn't financial. AITA for refusing to take over my sister's wedding planning after she ditched me as her maid of honor. I, 32F, have always been close to my younger sister, Emily, 29F. Growing up, we were inseparable despite the 3-year age gap. I've always been the responsible one, while Emily was more free-spirited and impulsive. We both went through rough patches in our early 20s, and I was there for her through heartbreaks, job struggles, and even when she moved across the country for a job opportunity. Last year, Emily got engaged to her longtime boyfriend, Mark, 31M, and I was thrilled. Naturally, I assumed I would be her maid of honor. We had spent hours talking about wedding ideas, dresses, and even the guest list. I was excited to help her organize her big day, and she seemed just as excited about me being involved. About 6 months ago, Emily told me she was reconsidering her wedding plans. She said she wanted a smaller, more intimate ceremony and started hinting that she didn't want me as her maid of honor anymore. She said she wanted someone less controlling to help with the planning and suggested that Mark's sister, Chloe, could take over instead. I was hurt, but I tried to stay supportive and asked her to at least let me help in other ways. Fast forward to 3 months ago. Emily called me in tears because the wedding planner she hired had quit and the new one she found backed out as well. She sounded panicked and asked me to step in and help coordinate the entire wedding. At this point, I realized she wasn't just asking for emotional support. She wanted me to practically plan the whole event, including the venue, catering, decorations, guest accommodations, and even liaising with vendors, all while she focused on her intimate vision with Mark and Chloe. I told her I couldn't take over entirely because I had a demanding job, and helping with the wedding already seemed overwhelming. I also felt blindsided because she had explicitly told me months earlier that she didn't want me as her maid of honor. She was furious and accused me of abandoning her and not supporting my own sister. She said that if I cared about her, I would step up and make her wedding happen. I tried to explain that being supportive doesn't mean I have to sacrifice my own life or take on full responsibility for a wedding that I wasn't even originally planning. I suggested hiring a new planner together or that she let Chloe take the lead while I helped in smaller ways that I could manage. She didn't want to hear it. She went on about how stressful wedding planning is and how she shouldn't have to deal with this alone, and kept mentioning how I had been so enthusiastic about being her maid of honor earlier, implying that I was now failing her. Things escalated when she posted on social media about her wedding planning struggles. Several family members commented asking if I could help, and she tagged me in the posts. Some of them even messaged me privately, saying I should step up for my sister. I felt torn because I love Emily and want her to be happy, but I also felt resentful that she had removed me from a role I've been excited about and then expected me to take over completely. The last straw was last week when she sent me a list of vendors, timelines, and a to-do schedule that essentially made me the acting wedding coordinator. She ended her message with, "I'm counting on you to make this happen. You've always been good at organizing things." I replied politely, saying I couldn't take on the entire wedding planning and offered to help with specific tasks like reviewing the guest list or attending a few meetings. She responded with a short message, "Fine. I guess I'll just handle it myself then. But don't be surprised if things get messy. I thought you cared." Our parents have since called me, frustrated that I won't help Emily, and my friends are divided. Some think I should step in because she's family, while others say she's being unfair and manipulative. Emily hasn't spoken to me since her last message, and every time I bring up the wedding, our parents sigh and look disappointed. I feel trapped between my desire to support my sister and the reality that taking on the full wedding planning would be exhausting and unfair. I guess I'm asking because I don't know if I'm the jerk here. On one hand, it feels like families should support each other, especially for something as important as a wedding. On the other hand, Emily removed me from the position I was excited for, then tried to guilt me into doing an enormous amount of work I never agreed to. I've suggested compromises multiple times, but she refuses to accept them. I love my sister, and I want her wedding to be beautiful, but I also need to set boundaries. So AITA for refusing to take over Emily's wedding planning after she basically sidelined me as her maid of honor and is now expecting me to do all the work? Or am I justified in setting boundaries and only helping in ways that I can reasonably manage? Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos also. Leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.